With America in flames and an election pending, Donald Trump gave a rather rousing speech at Mount Rushmore on the 4th of July 2020. In reference to the mania of identity politics and the cancel culture that is sweeping our societies, he declared that if you do not speak its language, perform its rituals, recite its mantras, and follow its commandments, then you will be censored, banished, blacklisted, persecuted, and punished. He was entirely correct to say so. Yet while it is undeniably getting worse, this culture has been with us for quite a long time now. Many historians cite the origins of this movement to January 1987 at Stanford University, where, after a speech by Jesse Jackson, radical students stormed a meeting of the university's governing body while chanting, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western culture has got to go." But in reality, it goes back much further than that, to at least 1969, when black radical activists held Cornell University hostage, literally at gunpoint, and demanded the decolonization of the curriculum. And they in turn were preceded by the Weather Underground, a terrorist group who coined the term and directed hatred at white privilege. Yet despite mountains of evidence, many of the worst culprits of cancel culture responded to Trump's speech by claiming that it doesn't exist, or by tacitly defending it. Owen Jones suggested that cancel culture, which he made sure to put in inverted commas, is a means for very rich and powerful people to pretend that they are victims when people respond to very controversial things they have used their huge public platform to say. No, Owen, it's when ordinary working people, the sort you claim to represent, have their jobs, careers, incomes, and relationships devastated for making moderate comments you disagree with, or for telling jokes that you don't get. It's the silencing of academics you dislike, while vile racists like Priyamvada Gopal get promoted. But do keep pretending that everything's about powerful elites, and that you're some kind of gallant champion of the oppressed. James O'Brien claimed that there's no actual culture war, is there? It's just a new way of describing disagreements between people who hate racism and discrimination and people who love it. Meanwhile, woke has just replaced politically correct as the most pretentious way of saying not a massive bigot. Now, it takes a special kind of stupid to argue that there's no culture war, even while declaring that everyone who disagrees with you is a racist. But that's James O'Brien for you. Philippa Sue was rather more direct. She haughtily announced that if you are cancelled, but do not wish to be, you must work to earn back people's respect by owning up to the thing that cancelled you in the first place, listening to others, educating yourself, and advocating on behalf of the people that you have offended or harmed. Well, thanks for telling me, Philippa. If I get attacked and have my life ruined by large numbers of people, the appropriate response is clearly to bow down to my abusers, to appease them, and to beg for forgiveness. Thanks for clearing that up. I must admit, I tend to be more persuaded by Matt Walsh, because he's entirely correct. The only way to stop the cancel culture mob is to never apologise to it, to give it nothing, to make no concessions, to offend it on purpose just out of principle, and to laugh in its face. That is the only solution. There is no other. This is a message that I feel should be sent directly to Keir Starmer and the group of liberal academics who sent an open letter to Harper's Magazine. Starmer had suggested, in reference to the BLM movement, that maybe we shouldn't be looking to dismantle Western civilization, to wipe Israel from the map, or to defund the police, which you'd hope wouldn't be the most controversial of opinions. But when he was criticised for this, he promised to undergo unconscious bias training. That's right, he's to be sent off for re-education, to correct his thinking, for suggesting that maybe we shouldn't disband the police force. Now, anyone who studied Maoist China should be terrified by this development. And anyone who hasn't should also be terrified by it. And then they should study Maoist China, because what happened there is becoming more relevant by the day. Philippa Soo could certainly do with study struggle sessions. Although, going by her advice, maybe she already has. Anyway, the people who really need to take Matt Walsh's advice are the 150 leading figures who signed the letter to Harper's. It voiced mealy-mouthed concerns over the recent liberal trend. Among the signatories were Steven Pinker, Martin Amis, Anne Applebaum, Margaret Atwood, and Salman Rushdie, who certainly knows a thing or two about cancel culture. The statement was even signed by Noam Chomsky. This is a man who's defended Pol Pot, Holocaust denial, the 9/11 bombers, and Slobodan Milosevic. But he's finally found his line, which is something, I guess. But the most famous name was certainly J.K. Rowling. Now, I can't admit to being a fan of Rowling. I was the wrong generation for Harry Potter, and I found her virtue signalling on the internet tedious for quite some time. But now the woke mob has turned on her, and she's shown considerable courage under pressure, the sort of spine conspicuously lacking in recent years. So I respect her for that, enormously. She's also posted fan art from her young fans on her Twitter account, which is a really nice thing to do, and which must be enormously exciting for the kids who sent it in. But her critics have then bombarded the threads with expletive-filled rants and porn where the children will see it. Because that's how you demonstrate your moral superiority. Right? Anyway, Rowling's taken a lot of stick, and she's taken it well. So she, along with the others on this list, decided to speak out. But what approach did they take? Well, they opened by defending the fact that powerful protests for racial and social justice are leading to overdue demands for police reform, along with wider calls for greater equality and exclusion across our society, not least in higher education, journalism, philanthropy, and the arts. A development they describe as a needed reckoning, one that they applaud. Well, bad start. You don't stand up to censors by appeasing them. But this critical error was speedily compounded. They went on to argue that the forces of a liberalism are gaining strength throughout the world and have a powerful ally in Donald Trump, who represents a threat to democracy. While we have come to expect this on the radical right, censoriousness is also spreading more widely in our culture. Now, I don't want to absolve the right of all blame, but the fact is that the greatest levels of censorship and intolerance have generally come from the left, from the Jacobins, Stalinists, Maoists, and Khmer Rouge. I'll do the Nazis in depth in another video, but they also originated as a revolutionary movement on the left, roots they never really left behind. And the horrifically censorious culture of the last few decades has also been almost entirely leftist in its nature. Absolutely every person who has stood up to defend or deny this bullying censorship recently has come from the left, and every single one of its critics has come from the right. But it's the approach of this letter that's the biggest issue. In apologising to identity politics and putting all the blame on right-wingers, this missive is no repudiation of cancel culture. It's an endorsement of its manifesto. Because you don't combat this mania by reassuring its worst culprits that they're right about everything. And this was made apparent when Jennifer Finney Boylan, one of the signatories, realised that she had put her name to the same cause as J.K. Rowling. and quickly issued a grovelling apology so she didn't upset the sort of people who think it's okay to push violent pornography in children's faces. She wailed that, "I did not know who else had signed that letter. I thought I was endorsing a well-meaning, if vague, message against internet shaming. I did know Chomsky, Steinem, and Atwood were in, and I thought, good company. The consequences are mine to bear. I am so sorry." So Boylan thinks that internet shaming is bad, unless it's directed at a children's author and her young fans, in which case it's clearly fine. So really, in pandering to this monith, Keir Starmer, Boylan, and the other signatories of this note are showing in no uncertain terms just how scared of cancel culture they are. And that, in itself, is clear evidence of how serious this situation really is, and of how important it is to take a properly robust opposition against it.